If I would have told you after Notre Dame's Week 2 loss to Northern Illinois that they'd have a very good chance of making the college football 12-team playoff for the first time, some would have thought I was a little crazy. If I would have told you then that they still had a chance at the number 5 seed, the most optimal position for the Fighting Irish, you probably would have stopped listening. Well, folks, after the recent college football playoff bracket being released, the rankings being released, Notre Dame is in prime position and still has a chance to get to number 5, but there are 3 key things that Notre Dame fans should be hoping for moving forward throughout the rest of the regular season and into the championship weekend. Let's talk about it here. Ryan Roberts, A to Z Sports. Let's react to Notre Dame's recent playoff ranking coming in at number 6. That is up from number 8 last week. Number 6 team in the 12-team playoff, which I think puts Notre Dame in a great position here. Not only, obviously, to cement their standing in the college football playoff, barring 2 victories the final 2 weeks against Army and USC, but also, I think that they still have a legitimate chance to be the number 5 seed, which is a dream scenario for Notre Dame, who obviously can never be a top 4 team in the playoffs because they are a independent and not a non-conference champion, which means they don't have the automatic qualifier. But number 5, especially on paper right now, and obviously things will change, but the number 5 team in the country, in the playoff bracket, I should say, Ohio State, who's number 2 in the ranking, but would be number 5 because they would not win the Big Ten, their first 2 rounds of games would be against BYU on the road. BYU at home, and then they would face off at Boise State in the second game. So playing BYU and Boise State in the first 2 games is a pretty dream scenario because both those teams are obviously very beatable in this type of a bracket. So that would be an optimal position. Now, obviously, that will change, but just for argument's sake, just so we understand where it currently stands, that's what number 5 would have in front of them on top of having that first round home field advantage in their back pocket as well. Now, for Notre Dame to get there, I think there's 3 key things. Number 1, this is most important. Notre Dame has to win their last 2 games. They have to beat Army this week, and obviously they'll be playing against them at Yankee Stadium, and then you got to go out to USC and defeat the Trojans in the final week of the regular season. Now, obviously, right, Notre Dame needs to be 11-1 to have a playoff berth this year with a Northern Illinois loss on their resume. But more than anything here, Army coming in at number 19 in this ranking is huge for Notre Dame because without a conference championship game, it's nice to have a conference building resume down the stretch. And although people are going to joke and throw shade at Army being ranked in the top 20, it only matters what the playoff committee thinks. And they think that they are a top 20 football team in college football. And if Notre Dame is able to defeat them, that is a nice resume boost down the stretch. And I think it's very important when you consider who's in front of Notre Dame to finish off this first key. Because right now in front of Notre Dame, you have a blockade of 4 Big Ten teams and 1 SEC team. Number 1 is Oregon. Number 2 is Ohio State. Number 3 is Texas out of the SEC. Number 4, Penn State. Number 5, Indiana. So you have a blockade of Big Ten. And in order for Notre Dame to really make the ascension that they need to hopefully get number 5 seed, they're going to have to jump a couple of these Big Ten teams. And if Notre Dame beats Army and they beat USC, I think that they have a good chance of just naturally jumping Penn State, who is not going to be in the Big Ten championship game, who at best case scenario is going to go 11-1 because they do not have a rough 2-game stretch to end the season. They are playing against Minnesota and they're playing against Maryland. That Army victory could very well just naturally jump you over Penn State. So not only would you automatically qualify for the playoffs unless chaos completely ensues at 11-1, you would also just naturally jump Penn State. So that's key number 1. Key number 2, this weekend, outside of Notre Dame beating Army, you need to hope that Indiana loses to Ohio State. You have to. Because Ohio State is a team that has a path, obviously, to the Big Ten championship game if they win. Indiana, though, if they lose, even if they end the year 11-1, they will be behind Notre Dame because when you look at their resume, it is not impressive on paper. If they lose to the only real legitimate team on their schedule in Ohio State, they don't have a resume building victory on there. There's no team that they have on their schedule that can compete with beating Texas A&M, with beating Army, with beating Louisville. Notre Dame would have the clear better resume. They would fall behind Notre Dame, and they wouldn't have a chance to catch up with a Big Ten championship game. So that would knock another Big Ten team potentially out. The third key also has to do with Ohio State. If Ohio State wins this weekend, in this hypothetical, you need them to go to the Big Ten championship game, and you need them to lose the rematch against Oregon. You need Oregon to end the year 13-0 after conference championship weekend. Because regardless, if Oregon loses to Ohio State, they're still probably going to be ahead of Notre Dame, because that will be their only loss of the season. It will be to a top 2 team in college football, more than likely, and that will be an opportunity for Oregon to stay in front of you even if they lose. But if Ohio State loses, that means that they are down to 2 losses on the season, and 2 losses obviously to Oregon, which would push them back. Even if it's only a few spots, I think Notre Dame would have a good chance of being in front of Ohio State as a 11-2 team, comparative to Notre Dame's 11-1. So you need to hope that happens. And also, if you push them back enough, we'll see what happens with seeding and everything, but you definitely do not want Ohio State to be comfortable and at home in the playoffs. If you even have to play against them at some point more on a your home turf situation, that would be most advantageous, because I still think Ohio State is, if not the best team in college football, top 2, and they are the biggest threat for me, or one of the biggest threats, and a bigger threat than Oregon, in my opinion, actually, in the college football playoffs. Folks, going to be a busy weekend of action, going to be a busy last few weeks of action. Make sure that you are staying tuned to A to Z Sports for all of your Notre Dame and college football needs. And as always, talk to you this weekend after hopefully a big victory for Notre Dame, because you know the drill. Go Irish.